When you're watching Primate trailer. Now, I enjoy a good horror movie. I enjoy a good scare every now and then, you know what I mean? I enjoy the horror genre. I think it's one of the underrated genres. I think it's one of those things where if you hit all the beats, right? If you hit all the tropes, if you do a jump scare, if you throw some blood in there, you can kind of do whatever you want in the horror movies. You know what I mean? That's kind of the cool thing about the genre. And I don't think Hollywood's ever going to be like, we're done with horror movies. We're never putting money into horror movies. Like, they're going to consistently put money into horror movies because, well, they work and they're a genre, and you can't completely destroy that, or you can't completely get rid of it. You know what I mean? And the same way you can't completely get rid of action movies or romance movies. You can't get rid of them. Now, they might be smaller in scale. You know what I mean? They might be Netflix or Tubi releases, but you can't fully get rid of them. And theatrical horror movies are kind of a staple. You know, some people go and they like to be scared in the theater. You know, it's a part of it all. But I recently watched a trailer for a movie called Primate. Now, you could probably guess what the movie's about just from the title alone. But the movie essentially revolves around a killer chimpanzee. And now, I know, that sounds insane right off the bat. How do they do it? You know, did the chimpanzee just emerge from the woods? How did they do it? And you're right, that is crazy. And for me, when I was watching the trailer, I was like, yeah, this is cooked. You know what I mean? Right off the bat, the premise alone is just not my favorite, but I was just kind of like looking at it for humorous purposes. And so as I watched the trailer, I just slowly started to realize they're trying to pit animals against humans. You know, it's kind of a genius idea. You know, it's a chimpanzee with more power, more strength, with also great intelligence, who's like learning new things. You know what I mean? Like, there's a part in the trailer where the girl is trying to call the cops or call somebody or whatever, right? And she's in the car and she's trying to lock the door to the car. And the monkey, the chimpanzee, has the keys to the car and is just unlocking it constantly. While she's like trying to lock the door manually, he just keeps unlocking the car. And then he opens the back and then he sneaks into the back seat. And then, you know, that's where terror ensues. And she tries to like run out the door. But, you know, obviously the monkey gets her. And so that's the movie, right? And it's full of blood and gore. They even have like the trope of like the guy who's like an idiot in the movie. You know, stuff like that. And I have to say, this movie is not your typical... This isn't, you know, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, you know what I mean? This movie does not in any way, shape, or form reflect other positive movies involving monkeys or chimpanzees or anything like that. It's supposed to be terrifying. And yet, every time I watch the movie, for some reason, or every time I look at the trailer or I think about the trailer, I can't help but feeling like, yeah, the humans should die. Because, like, there's no way you're that stupid. You allowed that. I mean, is it wrong to have a pet monkey? Is it wrong to have a pet chimpanzee? Is that wrong? Should we not allow that? You know? And I think that if you want a pet chimpanzee, you should have a pet chimpanzee. But just, you know, not keep it in the house, I guess. But then it's not really part of the family, right? So I guess it's one of those weird things where it's like, I guess you can kind of see it, you know, from the lens of like a dog, you know, where the dog starts going crazy and is rabid, you know, and it starts like attacking everybody, right? Like, that's a horror movie that's been done. But I think that, I don't know, it's one of those weird things where you watch a movie like Planet of the Apes or Rise of the Planet of the Apes or Dawn of the Planet of the Apes or War of the Planet of the Apes, right? You watch that movie, and even though they're up against humankind, you kind of like, oh yeah, I'm on the side of the, you know, I'm on the side of Caesar here. I like what they're doing here, you know what I mean? Whereas in the in this trailer, they're trying to make them the antagonist or like the evil villain of it all. And I just have to say it's like, yes, the monkey may be twisted or might be sinister, cold-blooded and a real killer, but it's just a chimpanzee. Like in the Planet of the Apes movies, you can kind of see like their intelligence grow and their mistreatment from humans. And this one, it's like a loving, well, maybe it gets mistreated in the movie, but then that gives us all the more reason to feel like he's justified in killing these people. So as I was watching the trailer, I just started to think to myself, like, I get what they're trying to do here. I really do. And by the end of the trailer, I was like, this movie's so predictable because really there's only two ways to go about it, right? The first way, the monkey dies in the end, right? Like, the threat is over. We killed it. We shot it, in the face, right in the face, right in the head. You know what I mean? It's just like that. We're going to defeat it and all's well that ends well. But then the other version, depending on, I don't know, I guess box office success, is the monkey kills everybody, escapes into the woods until its next hunt, until its next kill, until the next time it's like, I have to kill more people. And thus a franchise, a horror franchise is born. And then you get Primate 2. And then it's more people like, maybe the Primate finds more monkey comrades to attack and kill with, you know what I mean? And then maybe the Primate searches for a gorilla, and then it's like really going to be 100 men versus one gorilla. And that's kind of like the fascination with these primates, you know what I mean? Is, can man overcome the less evolved form of themselves? And it's kind of interesting to watch, and it's fun to watch. But I just don't think this horror movie, I don't think it's going places, man. I really don't. I know that there are a lot of horror movies that get like sequels. I think this one might. I really do. Because there's too much potential here for like killings and for ways to attack, right? And other monkeys getting on board, or another primate attacking people, or being let free and going on a terror rampage, you know what I mean? I think it's crazy. But it's just crazy enough to get people interested in seeing it and then making the decision for themselves that like, yeah, this isn't good or it's bad. Now, similarly, I don't know if I talked about this movie on this podcast, but similarly, there has been another kind of like vicious monkey chimpanzee attack, and that was in the movie Nope, directed by Jordan Peele. And, I saw that and I was like, oh, wow, that is scary, you know what I mean? That's terrifying, to have that happen to somebody, even somebody at a young age. But I was thinking to myself, like, that just feels like what the catalyst for all of this is that movie came out, and then we saw, somebody saw that movie and then was completely like, what we should do? A whole movie of just that. So it just kind of feels a bit, not like they have a good script or a good idea for a horror movie. It feels more like, what's a good concept for us to kill people or to make it horrifying, right? And that's why it's so cool to see that certain genres have to be that. You know what I'm saying? Like, some genres just have to... That's why horror movie is like the most creative, because you could just do whatever you want, right? If you have a concept, if you have an idea, you can just put it into the horror movie and it'll get greenlit because people love to see horror movies. You know what I mean? And it's a genre that's never going out of style. It's never going away. There's always going to be fear. There's always going to be something to fight. And it has the most chance of getting sequels and, the next movie and the next thing, right? So it's franchisable, but if done right. And I don't think this Primate movie is going to be done right in any way, shape, or form. I think it's just going to be like, you know, obviously it's a stupid idea to have the primate, the monkey, the chimpanzee, like living among them and in the house with no safeguards in place. But then it's also like stupid for them to just not call there's always going to be some sort of, there's a thing in the trailer where they're trying to call the police, or they're trying to call somebody and their phone's all cracked up and they call somebody and it's the stupid guy. He's like, yo, and then he comes over to the house and he's like, yo, and the primate is like, I'm going to kill him. And they just come up with different ways or different versions to like, oh, you can't call the cops for assistance or whatever. Like, for once, I want to see a movie where the characters do everything right. You know what I mean? They do everything right, and yet the villain or the killer or the bad guy of the story, they're just too good. You know what I mean? Like, imagine if the cops came over and the primate kills the cops. Now he gets their guns, and he's like doing all kinds of crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, that would be terrifying as well. So it's just one of those things, or one of those moments where you have to kind of think that they're not. Obviously, the big allure of the movie is like the killings, right? The primate has to kill, has to get blood, has to go wild, has to be angry, has to do a jump scare, has to do all of this stuff. But there's no chance of it being of high cinematic quality. Like, there's no script that was beautifully crafted, that was like, this is the most art. This is brilliant dialogue that you've done here. Most of the movie, I feel, is going to be, hello, is this the police? Yes, chimpanzee is in my house and he's killing everybody. And then the chimpanzee grabs them, kills them, attacks them, does whatever. Right? There's no way, no chance, no horror story where I guess help arrives, that they're on their own. And it's crazy. It's crazy. But there is potential with this movie. And when I say potential, I mean like a way for them to sort of build on this, okay? Now, as I said before, it ends with it dying or with another sequel where the monkey, gets away and is going to come back. You know what I'm saying? And if that happens, which I feel like it might, if that actually happens, I honestly feel like the sequel to this movie, like, obviously the origins of, like, how the primate becomes a killer primate, might not be as interesting. But then the second time it happens, it becomes crazier. So I think that they should do it where, like, on Halloween, the primate, like, decides to make its kill in a neighborhood. And all throughout the night, we just see it, like, terrorizing this neighborhood on Halloween, just going crazy. You know what I mean? There's just so much more opportunities to make it even crazier. Because this is crazy. This is a crazy idea. But how can we put it another step higher? So I was watching this trailer, and the thoughts just kept flooding into my mind. I was just like, this isn't something I particularly want to watch. But nonetheless, I feel like it's a movie that needs to know. It's not crazy in the good sense. They're not doing anything here that's like, they're not reinventing the wheel, or they're not creating like anything of real substance. What they're really doing here is they're creating a story for the shock and the concept, rather than the actual like story and the plot and the like getting people invested in the characters. You know what I mean? Because when you watch these movies, I don't. When you watch horror movies in general, right? For the most part, it's like you see these idiot teenagers doing something and then they get attacked, and then I'm like supposed to be like, oh, I care about them. I don't want them to die because they're human beings. But like before you know it, you start to wake up and you realize that like, okay, I know that they're people, they're human beings, they're cool, you know what I mean? But I just honestly, as I've gotten older, like before I used to think that there was real like, oh, these guys are villains, they're evil, they're twisted, you know what I mean? Like they have to die. And now I'm kind of like, when you go into the movie expecting it to like you know it's going to be crazy. You go into the movie rooting for the villain. I actually think that the movie's more enjoyable, you know? And then you start to nitpick and point out all of the flaws of the main characters. You're just like, they're not a good person. Look at what they're doing. Like they're not strong enough. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. They're just as messed up. You know what I mean? It's like the villain has all the right to kill this other person. You know what I mean? And you just, I don't know. It's a real shame that horror movies aren't able to build up their characters as well as, say, something like a drama. You know what I mean? Like there could definitely be like some horror elements in a drama, but it's very rare that you watch a horror movie and then you're like, wow, I really like that character. You know what I mean? That's not the main character. And then they just like, obviously they kill them off, you know? It's mostly like they get the idiot jock who's just like, yo, what's going on, my guys? This is what we're doing here. And so when you think about it like that way, you can kind of, get on board with the villain. That's my thinking now, is that like this Primate movie, when it comes out, I'm not going to watch it or anything, but if I were to watch it, I would like look at it and then I would be on the side of the chimp. When you're on the side of the bad guy, you win. You win. You know what I mean? There's nothing that's going to be like, oh, I shouldn't have rooted for that. Like, that's the whole point of the movie. You know what I'm saying? You want the monkey to win. You want the monkey to kill. You want them to destroy everybody in the house and all of the people. That's the movie. That's what they're going for. And so, I don't know. I think this is a horror movie this just goes to show the state of horror movies, you know? I think that you don't have to have a horror movie with I think that this is an example of them making a movie trying to get like shock value, or animals versus humans, man versus animal or whatever, right? And it's scary, it's terrifying, don't get me wrong. It's definitely something that you're like, oh, if that happened, that's scary, you know what I mean? But there's nothing more terrifying or scarier than man versus man. It's just people versus people. You see how scary that people who you're close to or friends with. That's why I kind of like that movie, The Purge. Maybe I should talk about that next time. The Purge is like an interesting concept, an idea, and it puts you into like this life or this world or the law where everybody is able to do whatever they want, and it's just craziness. So, when it comes to that idea, when it comes to concepts like that, you kind of think to yourself, or you wonder, or I don't know, you want to say to yourself like, hey, this is a great concept, an idea, and I think that, I don't know. All I know is that like man versus animal ends in one way. It rarely, if ever, ends in a specific way, or I guess in a in a way that, like, I guess makes sense or whatever. You know, I just wanted to talk about that and kind of feel out, like, as horror movies keep on getting made, they just slowly but surely just feel like they're not improving as much as I would like. And now maybe that's on me. Maybe that's my need for quality has gone up a lot higher for horror movies than they have in the past. And that's perhaps my nervousness, right? Like, when I was younger, those kinds of movies would scare me, like really scare me. Now movies like Parasite, movies like Juror Number 2, which is also an amazing movie. Juror Number 2, like those kinds of movies, like the drama and the other kinds of consequences, those ones really scare me, or they make me feel something, as opposed to like real horror movies. But I don't think I've ever talked about this, but the first time I watched Parasite, right? Because like everybody was making a big talk about like, oh, Parasite, and it was a Korean movie. I was like, oh, okay. Everybody was hyping it up so much, like I thought it was like Train to Busan. You ever see the movie Train to Busan? It's about zombies and stuff. It's a horror movie. It's a really good one, and it's, I liked it a lot, and I thought, oh, I thought it was another horror movie like that with zombies, or like, in this case, Parasite, I thought it was going to be about a bug. So when people started talking about, like, I saw it like on social media or whatever, people were talking about like the basement, and people were talking about this and talking about that. So I was like, okay, so the Parasite movie, I went into it thinking this. I thought the Parasite movie was about, there's a parasite in the basement, or like somebody is controlled by the parasite and they start like killing people, and that's what I thought the movie was about. Then when I actually watched the film, okay, it turned out to be something completely different, and I ended up like being even more like creeped out or upset or scared by the end of it, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like this movie, it was beautifully made and written, but the first time I watched it, I was just kind of like, damn, like, and I was also kind of waiting for the bug, you know what I mean? So I guess the first time I watched it, I was like a little confused, but then once the story like grips you in and you start following it, like it became just that much more crazy. And in the end, what I found out was that those dramas, those like reality shifts, they terrify me a lot more than actual blood and gore and stabbings. So in conclusion, I just want to say that this Primate movie, in concept, I understand it, I get it, I fully embrace it, and I think, wow, they're trying something new at least, or this is like this is an idea, you know what I mean? But overall, I think that we're missing something, we're missing something in the horror genre that could really be terrifying, that could really shift things, you know what I mean? But hey, who knows? Who cares? In the end, all that matters is, does it make money, And I guess we'll have to wait and see. If this Primate movie does well, get ready for Primate 2, The Return of the Chimp. You know what I mean? It's going to be something like that, but who knows? Anyways, if you guys end up going to see the movie, you know what I mean? Like, by all means, let me know how it goes, you know what I'm saying? But overall, I just feel like it's going to be one of those movies that is just like, the gimmick alone doesn't sell you, But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.